Children's bones were dug up here. In the summer of 2020, this quiet graveyard was anything but. The sound of grinding gears had turned into a construction site. A local man ripped through the forgotten dead with an excavator. He wasn't just extending the family plot, he was carving into a communal promise, one that was kept for over 3.5 centuries. And today, we're going to walk this ground and prove that unmarked doesn't mean empty. That promise began with a priest who was robbed of everything but his calling. Reverend Patrick Everard was appointed abbot of Dunbrody by Pope Urban VIII. Instead of taking control of his abbey, which was still occupied by the Etchingham family, where in the 16th century they turned the house of God into a private residence, he humbly became the parish priest of St James's Church at Ballyhack. Reverend Everard's importance was signified by a visit from the Papal Nuncio, the Pope's own ambassador. In 1647, the Papal Nuncio came all the way to Ballyhack just to meet him. Even though he was stripped of his abbey, Rome still honoured him. And the plaque you see on the wall there, that's the wrong name. The church records call him Patrick Everard. He was an abbot on paper, but a parish priest here on this hillside. During the chaos of 1650 Ireland, he was taken by the plague and brought to Ballyhack to be buried. If a plague abbot can be misremembered in this ground, what chance does a child's bone in an unmarked trench have? That promise survived the plague. It survived the famine. But devastation doesn't always arrive with the stench of blight or the toll of a plague bell. Sometimes it just needs a grey Sunday in November. On one of those Sundays in 1940, Thomas Whitty and his best man Robert Keaton pushed a small boat into strong choppy water. They were crossing the passage east so Thomas could make the final arrangements for his wedding. He was due to marry Mary Elliott in just 3 days. Halfway across, people on shore saw the two men standing up in the little boat, waving frantically. The restless power of the waves took the punt, rolled it, and threw them into the freezing channel. That short stretch between the two villages suddenly became too far to swim. By the time rescuers reached them, the water had already taken them. When they recovered Thomas's body, they emptied his pockets. They found his entire future soaked through. A crumpled letter of freedom. A wedding ring chilled by the cold water, still waiting for the hand it was meant to rest on. He died carrying proof that he was free to marry, and the ring he never got to place on Mary Elliott's finger. Keaton's death though is its own cruelty. Only a year before, he'd survived 3 days on a raft in the open sea, 3 days clinging to life, only to drown in a narrow strip of tide between two shores he knew like the back of his hand. On the stone here you see the name Paul, but the locals call him Thomas. Thomas Paul, 2 names for the same man. But look at what the Whitty family carries on this headstone. Look at William. He buried his brother Thomas Paul in November 1940. Less than a month later he commemorated his father, Patrick, who was lost at sea. He didn't even know that his son died less than a month before him. If that wasn't enough, he then buried his infant son. And in 1945, at just the age of 30, he followed them. 3 generations of men folded into this hillside in 5 years. The promise that's been kept for over 3.5 centuries protected everyone. But to understand why it broke in 2020, you have to understand this graveyard. Nobody owns it. The church doesn't own it, the council doesn't own it, not even the state owns it. There's no deeds, there aren't any records, and there's no rules. 4 priests are buried in here, somewhere. Their names are on that plaque with Patrick Everard, but their graves are unmarked. Same for some of the 29 sailors from the Alfred D Snow, shipwrecked off the coast in 1888, unmarked. Famine victims who came here hoping to board ships that never sailed. Children who didn't survive the way, all unmarked. Cromwell's refugees, plague dead. Drowning victims with no family left to carve their names, all unmarked, could be anywhere. For 370 years, that's been the covenant of this ground. The dead don't need a stone to belong here. But it's also the danger, because when no one owns the ground, and the dead have no markers, who protects them? Well, in June 2020, the answer was no one. A local elderly man brought heavy machinery onto the graveyard. Early Tuesday morning, a neighbour arrived to find workmen digging. The trench stretched 5 pallets long and 3 pallets wide. They dug down 5 or 6 feet. Concrete foundations were laid, block walls rising 6 feet to the surface. Neighbours reported seeing hip bones, arm bones, leg bones, a skull, all thrown onto the spoil pile like construction waste. The parish priest and the guards, the health service and the council were all alerted. Then during an interview with the paper, the man who organised the dig called it much ado about nothing. He said, "That's a pauper's graveyard, you know what that means. As if they were just squatters in their own graves. I was just extending the family plot, doing it for myself." 4 of his brothers are buried here. 3 were taken young by muscular dystrophy and 1 in infancy. Even his mother and father are buried here. He said he was cleaning it up. The ground was real rough underneath. There were no marked graves, an odd bit of bone here and there. An odd bit of bone here and there. They didn't see ancestors, they saw rubbish. He said the graveyard's over 500 years old. As if that gives them the right to turn a graveyard into a landfill. The council came to inspect. The guards came as well, they said. No malicious damage done. He was told to stop. Yet by Friday, 3 days later, workers were still on site, pouring concrete, building foundations. A council director said, his client thought no one owns this. But that's not how it works. Graveyards deserve respect, he said. But the truth is clear now. These bones belong to sailors lost in storms, the famine children who waited in vain for ships, to the plague abbot who served this community. They were not debris, and digging them up wasn't maintenance. It was erasure. Erasure of memory, of promise, of the dead who trusted this ground to keep them. A local resident said, "It's not a pauper's graveyard. 4 priests lie buried there. This was a major construction operation. They dug down 5 or 6 feet when normally you just go 1.5. The way the bones were scattered all over the ground was disgraceful. Reckless desecration. Possibly deliberate. It's a pity they didn't stop when they realised. The bones look small, like children's. That's very disturbing." Children's bones scattered like gravel while concrete poured over the past. The elderly man carved through the soil because he wanted to be buried beside his brothers and his parents. He saw the grass beside his family plot, no markers on it, assumed it was empty, and claimed it. But as we now know, this ground is far from empty. It hosts centuries of souls, from sailors ripped from storm-torn ships, famine children waiting for vessels that never came, plague priests who served without abbey or reward, promises carved in unmarked bone and soil. So when a place has no owner, but holds 4 centuries of trust in the soil, who does it really belong to? The living who have a voice, a shovel and a plan? Or the dead who are too silent to defend their own bones? Tell me where you stand in the comments.